I felt the responsibility that I was able to take willingly and just feel like I was respected and that like there's no better feeling
Mm.
than knowing that your wishes were respected and that everything went the way that it was supposed to go.
Welcome to the Happy Home Birth Podcast, your source for positive natural childbirth stories and your community of support, education, and encouragement in all things home birth and motherhood. You're either for something or you're against it, right? Like you either love ultrasounds or you don't, or you want testing done or you don't, or gasp, there could be more to it than right or wrong. Hey there, happy home birthers, and welcome to episode 277 of the Happy Home Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Fusco, and this week we are speaking to Taylor Shaffer, a wife, mother of two beautiful girls, holistic doula, and online educator. Taylor is passionate about nourishment, holistic living, and taking radical responsibility for your health and your birth choices. She serves women locally in the upstate of South Carolina through her doula agency, Nested and Nourished, as well as online through her holistic mama pregnancy and birth course, virtual doula support offerings, and her podcast titled Holistic Pregnancy, and so much more. We've got so much to learn from Taylor. Now, before we jump in, I want to take a moment to share about a ministry that truly stands out to holistic families like my own, Samaritan Ministries. One of the many things that I love about Samaritan is that they share bills for medical needs that many insurance plans will not cover. Want to know a perfect example of this? Oh, I don't know. How about home birth? How many times have I heard mothers complain that their insurance won't touch their home birth bills? Not the case with Samaritan. It's such an incredible system built on Christ-like principles. I've got a link in the show notes where you can learn more. Fill out the form. Someone from Samaritan will reach out to provide more information. And as a thanks from me, you will receive the first module of Happy Home Birth Academy for free. All right, let's jump into this week's episode. Taylor, thank you so much for coming on the Happy Home Birth Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. It's fun to have someone who's local, who I've met in person before. It just adds a little excitement to the conversation, just knowing some of your background and also seeing some of your story that you posted on social media recently. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
it's going to be so fun to get a full, well-rounded view. So, would you mind starting by just introducing yourself and your family to the listeners?
Yeah, my name's Taylor. I am here local to upstate South Carolina. I have a wonderful husband and two beautiful girls, one of which at the time of recording is 10 days old and on my chest right now. And we have been settled here for about 5 years and have just really fallen in love with the upstate. And I am a part of the local birth community, so I serve as a doula, I have served as a student midwife, and I also offer some online education. So it's just been really cool to be in this really, I guess, for lack of a better term, super crunchy community and very home birth friendly. It's been amazing to be surrounded by so many like-minded people here.
It is. I mean, it really is just such a, I don't know, such a miraculous pocket of
Yeah.
like-minded people.
Yeah, we had no idea when we moved here, and it's just been like such a pleasant surprise.
Well, even just over the last, 8 years, just thinking back from when I had my first to now, the landscape is so different. There are
Mhm.
so many midwife options. There are so
Yeah,
many people who are interested in home birth. And I'm sure that COVID did a lot of that, where people were like, okay, well, we can't do this or that. So we've got to
sure.
pick. And, but it is incredible the way that this community has just exploded. So thank you for being a part of that. That's
Of course.
incredible. Yeah. And what I'd love to do is, so this is your second baby.
Mhm.
So really quickly, is there anything about your first birthing experience that you feel is really important for us to understand about this second birthing experience?
Yes. So my first was very straightforward, thankfully. It was uncomplicated. I did have a home birth with my first. It was great. I had a different midwife, but I still had a great experience. I had some doubt though, and she got pretty close to 42 weeks and I really freaked out and I took castor oil. And thankfully my experience was smooth and I was pretty naive to what castor oil could do, but it just kind of reinforced this idea that it's almost like I didn't fully trust my body. I didn't fully trust that I could just make all my own decisions. I was like, well, if I, don't have this baby in the next few days, I have to go to the hospital. I have to be induced. I have to do this. I have to do this. And that was just like terrifying to me. And so now in hindsight, I realize like, no, actually, I wouldn't have had to go to the hospital. But, then you might risk like having to birth alone if your provider doesn't, want to attend after 42. So I put a lot of stock in my provider's opinions, which again, I had a great experience, but I really wish that I had taken more responsibility for what I really wanted. And I felt like not that my wishes weren't being respected or anything like that, but just that like, I was a first-time mom and that maybe I really didn't know what was best for me. And I just kind of had that feeling walking away from my birth of I could have really had a more autonomous birth at the end of the day. And I didn't. And so this time it was very important to me. I had a lot of talks with my midwife about like the things that I did and did not want during pregnancy and the things that I did and did not want for my birth. And it really all came down to autonomy and how much I just wanted to feel like everything was my choice, regardless of what happened. So that was really an important part of my first birth because it shaped, A, it brought me into birth work, and B, it shaped the way that I just perceive birth in general. And even for first-time moms, for clients, like I encourage them, like just because you haven't done this before doesn't mean you don't know how to do it. I think that was pretty pivotal for affecting my most recent birth experience.
Oh man, I mean, those are such huge concepts to grasp and realize, and how powerful to know, like, and to be able to share this with your clients. That is incredible. However disappointing it is in your, from your perspective, but also to be able to provide that information for your clients. I'm
Yeah,
glad that you can take something that wasn't perfect and then use it for such good.
right.
So yeah, what a great way to be able to serve your own clients.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's talk about this pregnancy then. It's obvious that you knew you wanted to do things differently. You had
Yeah.
learned from this previous experience that you could take more responsibility. You could have true autonomy. What did that look like during pregnancy?
So I will start by saying this pregnancy was very difficult, a lot more difficult and complicated than my first. And so I'm very grateful that this was my second and not my first because I think things would have looked a lot different had I not gone into it with this mindset of like, okay, less is more. Like, we don't need to do all of the things to intervene. So it started off very normal. I was actually like, wow, I'm so grateful I'm not sick. Nothing's wrong. Like, I feel great. And then, like, around 11 weeks, I just like everything hit the fan and I got really sick and I couldn't sleep at night. So I was exhausted. I was puking every day and I was like, what is going on? But I just kind of like kept trucking. I was like, this is just pregnancy. And I had had really bad pubic symphysis pain with my first pregnancy. So I was just sort of expecting that to come back. So I sort of jumped ahead and was like, let's go ahead and get in pelvic floor therapy and like nip this in the bud. Ended up finding out I had like major prolapse. And I was like, well, this is great. So all of that kept going on and on. And I also, it is very, I should mention, it's very important to note that I also had a miscarriage before this pregnancy. So my whole first trimester was just like extreme anxiety. So I think that contributed to my lack of sleep, sickness, all of that. I was just very, very scared all the time and very paranoid about everything. And so it just was really hard to kind of settle my body. So I'm sure that contributed a little bit. But about halfway through my pregnancy, I felt I had decided like I was not going to do an anatomy scan. We did the sneak peek to find out her gender. We did want to know the gender. So I was like, I've done the blood test. I don't really need an anatomy scan. But around like 23 weeks, I just got this like pit in my stomach. And I was like, I need to see her on a screen and know that she's okay. But I didn't feel like there was anything wrong necessarily. Like there wasn't something specific I was worried about. I just had this like nagging feeling. And I was like, Taylor, you of all people know that you should listen to that feeling. And that's what you tell everybody, like, listen to that feeling. So I texted my midwife. I was like, hey, can you order an ultrasound? Like, just like a really brief, like a 10-minute, I don't need a full anatomy scan. I just want to make sure like she's got all of her like organs and appendages basically. So we got in there and like I said, it was 23 weeks. And they were like, so she looks good, but she's measuring 25 weeks. And I was like, well, that's weird because I know my due date for sure. And my other baby always measured a little behind on ultrasound. She was, 42 weeks almost and 8 pounds. So she wasn't a very big baby. And I was like, okay, interesting. I'll just, take that with a grain of salt because we know ultrasounds aren't all that accurate. But I was like, it's still kind of early. So to be 2 weeks off, that's a lot. And so I was like, you know what? I had decided to do no prenatal testing, but I was like, I'm just gonna check my blood sugar at home, just to see if that maybe is a factor, but it's probably fine. So I checked my blood sugar after dinner one night. It was like 180, and I was like, oh, that's not normal. So I kept checking it, and then the next morning I woke up, it was like 120, like fasting, and I was like, whoa, this is not normal for me. I had no previous history of insulin resistance. I had my A1C drawn when I got pregnant and it was totally normal. So I was very blindsided. I'd never had any blood sugar issues and ended up having gestational diabetes. And I was like, I would have never known if I had not just like listened to that feeling and gone and got an ultrasound. And so it's kind of humbling because I am a person who's like, you don't need any testing, you don't need any ultrasounds, none of it's necessary. But at the end of the day, like intuition always wins out. So yeah, I figured out really quick like that was an issue that I needed to address even though I wasn't having any symptoms of it. I did end up having symptoms afterwards, but in hindsight I think maybe that's why I was so sick for the first or really for the second trimester, when normally I would be done after the first trimester and feeling better. I was getting sicker, and so I really just like worked. I did a lot of research and to manage that holistically instead of there were a few times where I got really nervous and I was like, do I need insulin? Do I need to take metformin? Like my midwife was very grounding, very calming, and she was like, what do you think? Like, really, what do you think? Don't make these decisions out of fear. So that was really encouraging to have a provider who was like, this really is your decision, not mine. And so it really empowered me to do a lot more research on my own. And so I ended up managing that completely without medication. My A1C, actually, my third trimester was lower than my pre-pregnancy A1C, which is insane to me. I was like, wow, I'm so proud of myself. On the downside, I feel like I probably was under eating a little bit, but at the end of the day, I was like, I have to have a healthy baby. So we're just gonna do what we gotta do to get through pregnancy. But yeah, otherwise my pregnancy was pretty low intervention. I didn't take prenatals. I didn't do any other testing. I skipped all the normal stuff like GBS and all that unnecessary testing. I felt personally unnecessary.
Unless your intuition says otherwise.
Right. Exactly. Yes. If you feel like something's up, like definitely go for it. But for me, I was just like, I didn't give a second thought about it, and I got no pressure from anybody, which was awesome.
Well, I'd really be curious to hear when you say you did these holistic natural interventions well, not even interventions, but the things that you changed to help with gestational diabetes. Would you share some of the things that you chose to
Yeah.
do?
I am so passionate about this now because I had no idea how much blood sugar affected your health, like all of your health. And so the first thing that I did and that I recommend literally everybody ever, whether you are pregnant or not, whether you have any history of blood sugar issues or not, is to read The Glucose Revolution, which is it's a pretty short, easy book. It's by Jessie Inchauspé. She's French. It's hard to pronounce her name, but she's the glucose goddess on Instagram. But she wrote this book called The Glucose Revolution, and she just makes it incredibly easy and accessible to anyone to understand how glucose works in the body. And so for me, it was really figuring out not just what my food triggers were for glucose spikes, but like my biological triggers. So for me, stress was the biggest thing. So like external stressors, like worrying about our financial situation or my husband's job, like those sorts of things actually affected my blood sugar way more than the food I ate. And then like the quality of my sleep. So really trying to prioritize decreasing stressors inside and outside of my body. So, like mental stressors, but also the physical stressors like lack of sleep or doing too much or being dehydrated. That dehydration is a huge one that affects blood sugar that most people don't realize. Like, the difference between you drinking a quart and a gallon of water a day could be the difference between like normal blood sugar levels and extremely high blood sugar levels. So it's just really simple things like that. And she talks a lot in the book about like little hacks you can do, like eating your vegetables before you eat your carbs, like just things like that, where you don't really have to change your diet all that much. It's more changing your perception of how food works in the body and how your body can compensate for those foods, even if you have like a treat here and there. So I worked a little bit more on movement, like walking daily, just to sort of keep my metabolic rate higher. I didn't do a lot of exercise because I hate exercise, let's be honest. And I'm also going to the pelvic floor therapy at this time, and she's like, do this and do this. And I'm like, I don't want to do all this stuff. So I honestly, I did the bare minimum when it came to exercise. And I realized there were a few like absolute hard no foods. Like I could not have white rice ever. And that's just part of it. I couldn't eat bread unless it was like fresh milled flour because that doesn't spike your blood sugar as bad. And I just learned like, okay, I have carbs after I have protein and vegetables. Like, I can live with that. Yeah, I did take myo-inositol and that was really helpful. And that's just a natural blood sugar stabilizer. I want to say it's some sort of naturally occurring thing in the body that you can also get in capsule form. So I took that a little bit. But yeah, that was really it, was just understanding how glucose works and figuring out how my body processed the glucose and not spiraling because the first couple weeks I really spiraled and got so stressed out about it and that made it worse. And so figuring out how to like keep my thoughts at bay also like massively changed the way my body handled it. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Wow, the thing that strikes me about this whole story is how helpful in the long run this situation was for you. I mean, think about the
Yeah.
fact that if you hadn't had this experience, okay, so you wouldn't have learned about all that you've learned about blood sugar, which really is incredible. I'm so glad you mentioned the glucose goddess. Her Instagram is so cool. Like
It's so helpful.
it is amazing. I love all of her information. I have not read her book though, so I'm gonna put that on my
Do
to
it.
read
It's
list.
such an easy read.
Yeah, that sounds great. But thinking about what you said, you're checking and you're seeing, oh my goodness, even more than food, my thoughts, like my thought life is affecting my blood sugar.
Yeah.
So for you to be able to see that and recognize it now as a pregnant mother and to be able to begin to work on shifting that, what a gift for yourself
Yeah.
as you continue on through motherhood. What a gift for your children to see a mother regulate. That is so cool, Taylor. Like, that is really such an exciting thing. And it all came from you hearing that, oh, you know what? Like, I think something's wrong, or getting that sensation something is off a little bit, not like dangerous, but something is off. And I'm going to look into it, following through with that, and then taking what you learned from that information and going further. I think that that is such a beautiful process and so incredible for other mothers to hear. What does it mean to like really, we say like listen to your intuition. What does
Yeah.
that mean? Like what does that really mean? And what you just described is such a perfect example of that. And look at all of the fruit that came from it. That is
Oh,
so
yeah.
amazing.
Thank you.
Wow. Okay, so we talked about the gestational diabetes. Yeah, what else in your pregnancy would you like to share?
So I highly recommend pelvic floor therapy for everybody, especially if you've had a baby before, because what happened to me was I went to therapy at the end of my first pregnancy just for pain management for the SPD. But like I said, after my birth, I ended up having a grade 2 cystocele and rectocele, so prolapse. And I actually had an evaluation after my first birth, and the therapist that evaluated me was like, there's nothing wrong. And I was like, there is definitely something wrong. And it was like another one of those circumstances where I was saying something and the provider was not hearing me. Another thing that sort of like propelled me into this like autonomy mindset because I was like, I know that something's going on. But she sort of dismissed it, and that therapist is not around here anymore. I think for that reason. But this time I was like, okay, I feel that same familiar feeling and it's getting worse now that I have pressure from a baby. So I went to a different therapist who was just like super thorough, did a lot of like functional evaluation. She's like, yeah, you definitely have these things going on. And I was like, okay, we're gonna get on top of this. Like just another thing that I was like, I know in my body something is up. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to get worse. And so that was really a blessing. But what really changed my life, honestly, which I had never considered before, because I'm like, nothing, I do not do cervical checks during pregnancy. Nothing goes inside of me. Like, we are not doing that, was internal myofascial release work. I was so skeptical, so skeptical. And like the moment I started feeling any kind of like pelvic pain like that pubic symphysis pain again and like that really intense SI joint pain. The first time I had that internal myofascial release, I kid you not, Caitlin, I looked at the person that was doing it and I said, this is exactly what my labor felt like. Like the sensation, the only way I could describe it was the contractions I felt during labor. And it
Wow.
was like not the level of intensity or the level of pain or anything like that. It was just like a very specific feeling. And I was like, maybe my labor, because I had what I would consider back labor without a posterior baby. And I think it was because of the tension in my pelvic floor. And I was like, everybody needs to do this. Like, this is amazing. And the coolest part, that was maybe around like 25 weeks or so, or 28 weeks. And she had been breached. I mean, most babies are at that, until halfway through pregnancy or so. And that night, I like very, very obviously felt her flip. And I was like, wow, this, like, imagine how many people could turn their babies by doing myofascial release. Like, this is
Absolutely.
so cool. And I
Wow.
was so skeptical, but I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna give it a shot because I want to do something. And I never had any SPD, no pubic symphysis pain again in this
Wow.
pregnancy. It was amazing.
Amazing. That is
Yeah.
incredible. And since you are local and there are a number of local people who listen to the podcast, I don't know if you would want to share who you saw and who your pelvic floor therapist was,
Yeah.
but you're
So
welcome
I
to.
had the internal release done first by my midwife, actually,
Yes.
who's Carrie
Awesome.
Glenn with Rooted Birth. She's incredible. Highly recommend. And then for physical therapy, I saw Dr. Stephanie Daniel with Fortis Physical Therapy. And she's just been awesome, like super thorough and just, she doesn't just look at it as like a diagnostic situation. She's like, what changed from last week to this week? And then we adjust. And so that was really helpful because I did have a lot of changes, just like everybody during pregnancy. And you can't just stick to one like regimen for 6 weeks. Like it's got to change week to week. But she also offers the internal release as well. So yeah, I recommend both of them.
Very, very exciting to know. And that there is somebody online, if you are looking in your area and you don't have anybody, I think her name is Lindsay Corsell. I think that's her name, but she has courses where you can like learn to do some of these releases yourself. I though have I've done that myself and it was much harder than I think what it would have been if I had had somebody doing the releases
Yes.
on herself, especially
I,
when you're pregnant and you've got that big belly. Like
yeah.
it's pretty hard. So if you can find somebody local and you're comfortable with something like that, wow, I think that is so great, Taylor.
Totally. I attempted myself with a pelvic wand, like
Yeah.
in between for maintenance, and it just is not the same as
Yeah,
somebody else who's really trained in it and can like feel the fascia moving. I'm like, yeah, it's priceless, honestly.
that's incredible. I'm so glad to hear that that was your experience and that there are people locally that can provide that for us upstate South Carolina people.
Yeah.
But if you're not
Yes.
here, there are other options, I'm sure.
Yeah, and
Um,
sometimes you just gotta ask because neither of those people publicly advertise that. So you're not gonna find them in a Google search. So yeah, but I highly recommend either of them if
awesome.
you're local.
Amazing. Awesome. Okay, so we've got the gestational diabetes, we've got the pelvic floor. Both of these things, incredible growth experiences for you, like something negative being turned into something really empowering. How cool is
Yeah.
that? What is this? Is this a theme? Um,
Yeah,
so,
right?
so is there anything else that happened like this?
So the end of my pregnancy, honestly, Caitlin was like hell on earth. It was so hard. And like I just couldn't wrap my brain around why all of these things kept happening. So for one, I started noticing like swelling in my feet and my legs. But like at 30 weeks. And I was like, what? This feels early. Like I remember this at the end, like that's pretty normal, for like 40 weeks or so. But I was like, this feels really early. And so it just kept getting worse. Like it just wouldn't go away ever. So by like 35 weeks, I'm having to spend several hours a day on my back with my legs up the wall or like inverted just to because it was so painful because my legs were so swollen that my skin like couldn't you couldn't touch it. I couldn't wear socks, I couldn't wear shoes. It was so painful, but I was like, you know what? My blood pressure's fine, everything's fine, so I'm not going to worry. This is just really annoying. And I also had polyhydramnios. And so I just had all this fluid. Like my belly was massive. And I was like, this baby's going to be 15 pounds. Like, she's huge. And my midwife was like, it feels like fluid. Like, it feels like really squishy. And so, with all of this, with all the fluid and having to be on my back all the time, she was always posterior. She was posterior up until the end. And I was like, man, this is just not how I thought this was going to go. Honestly, the swelling was the most painful and annoying symptom of pregnancy I've ever had. I'm like, this is just like cruel and unusual punishment. Like
Yes.
I don't want this. And it was just restriction in my pelvis. Like my lymphatic system just could not move the fluid. There was just so much of it and it was just getting like stuck in my legs. My face, my shoulders, my arms were so thin. Like but everything from my hips down, like when I tell you my legs are now half the size after birth, I'm not exaggerating. It is insane.
Wow.
So I look back at pictures and I'm like, oh my word.
Like, no
I was
wonder I was in
so,
pain.
yeah, yeah. So that just never went away. That was there till the end. And then 37 weeks, I got a stomach virus. Like, I don't know if it was norovirus or whatever, it was going around.
Probably. That's
And
what we got.
it was awful.
Yeah.
I had a nurse friend come give me an IV at my house because I couldn't get off my couch. It was so, so awful. Thankfully, it only lasted 24 hours. I was like, you know what? Now I'm in the clear. Like, my body's just clearing out. Now I'm gonna have a baby. I spent this whole pregnancy thinking she would come early. So much so that I was worried she would come too early because of the all of the just stress on my body. She did not come too early. She did not. So I got like a few days of respite, and then at 38 weeks, I got RSV.
No, no, no,
Yes. And
no.
I was sick until was in labor. So it was absolutely miserable. My husband and I both were sick. Neither of us slept. Like waking up, like feeling like I was drowning in the middle of the night. I ended up having to go like an urgent care to get like a rescue inhaler because I literally couldn't breathe. It was terrifying. And this whole time, I am just like, my baby cannot be born into this. Like my baby cannot be born yet. Like please stay in. I was wanting her to come and now I'm like, I can't. I can't. I literally can't handle labor right now. Like this is too much. And it was just it was the most brutal illness I think I've ever had. And I'm like, my body just could not clear it out. I think because of the baby. Like, I think if I had not been pregnant, I would have gotten over it much quicker.
Yeah,
But just with all the other metabolic stress going on, it was really, really tough. So we basically just did everything we could. I mean, you can't really do much when you're pregnant. You can't really do much for a respiratory illness anyways, other than like steam and saline and, rest. But it's also hard to rest when you're sick and also have a toddler running around. So,
that is so
it
hard.
it was very challenging. Yeah, it was very challenging. That also put a lot of strain on my pelvic floor because of all of the coughing and the pressure from the baby. So I went from having essentially healed this prolapse to having to wear pads because I peed every time I coughed. And my belly was so sore. I ended up like extremely, we realized after the birth, like extremely emphasizing my diastasis. Like everything just in 2 weeks, like destroyed my body. And I was like, wow. I didn't know so much could happen in such a short amount of time, but
Mm,
it's just all of the pressure from the baby, the fluid, and like the extreme coughing fits on top of it just made it so, so hard. It was really like that right up until the end, until I went into labor. So,
wow. Wow,
yeah.
gosh. Yeah, I remember when I was 35 weeks pregnant with my second, I got a really bad stomach bug. That it was only like 24 hours, but
Yeah.
it was intense. And I remember feeling like, am I gonna push this baby out while I'm
It felt
vomiting?
like
Like,
that. Yeah.
and so to like put myself in your shoes and to go through that and the depletion of that, and
Yeah.
then to jump into a respiratory illness, like Taylor, that, oof, I'm so sorry that that was your experience. That just sounds so difficult. And yes, I think because you were depleted plus pregnancy, like, oh my goodness, your body trying to handle RSV, that is so intense.
Yeah. I would not wish it
Woo.
on my worst enemy.
No, not 10 out of 10, don't recommend.
No.
So okay, so but you had this experience, but you did eventually go into labor and have a baby.
Yes, I
So
did.
how did that happen?
So this is the craziest thing I have ever heard, and not maybe not really, but because it happened to me, it feels really crazy. So My midwife is also a craniosacral therapist. So we did like regular sessions of that. And she had just come over to my house. I was still sick. My toddler was being like extra toddler-ish for like the whole week leading up to my labor. She just knew, I guess. But she was so wild. And so my midwife came over at like 6:30 on Friday night just for like a regularly scheduled CST visit. And I'm like laying on the foot of my bed and my toddler is jumping on the bed next to me, singing No More Monkeys Jumping on the Bed and just screaming and like throwing herself down, like laughing. She's having fun, but I'm just like chaos. So much chaos around me. And we had just come off of spring break, so she was home all the time. She normally is in preschool. And so I was just like, you could just tell in my face, like I was just done. I was so exhausted from being sick and tired. And this was 40 weeks in one day. Again, this was Friday night. She came over about 6:30. We started CST about 6:45-ish, I don't know, give or take. So about 15 minutes into CST, while I'm laying on my bed watching my toddler jump around, she is like working on my sacrum and she's like, your sacrum is very, very tight. Like there's, she's also working on some acupressure points for my bladder. Everything's just really compressed. Like I said, from all the coughing and all the tension in my body. So if anybody's familiar with CST, it's very, very gentle, like very light touch fascial work. So she's like pushing into my sacrum just a little bit, and I have this like insane feeling in my body. And I looked at her and I said, "What was that?" And she said, "What was what?" And I was like, "Did you not hear that? It sounded so loud to me." She was like, "What do you mean?" And it felt like I like got shocked. I was like, "What? What happened?" Like a balloon popped. And I was like, "Did my water break?" And she was like, "Well, did you feel a gush of fluid?" And I was like, "No." So that's weird. So then I started second guessing and I was like, "Oh my God, did something just rupture in my body? Like, am I having a placental abruption?" I started like freaking out, just going down the line of worst case scenarios. And I rolled over, had this giant gush of fluid, and was like, "Well, my water just broke. I'm gonna get up and go to the bathroom now." And I went and like immediately was like, "Is it blood?" Like my brain just, I was just, this whole pregnancy had just been so stressed about everything. And I was like, this is not how I wanted labor to begin. So I confirmed like it was just fluid and it was fine. It was clear. Like everything was safe. Like we were all good. But I just started like shaking. I was like, I am, what is this feeling? And Carrie was like, "It's adrenaline." She was like, "That's a normal physiologic response sometimes to your water breaking, especially if it shocks you and it's out of nowhere. You're not in labor. You weren't expecting this. That's normal for you to feel this way." And I was like, "Okay, well, I'm freaking out." I was like, this is not, as a doula, I have unfortunately had a lot of traumatic, I won't say a lot, a handful of traumatic experiences that all started with premature rupture of membranes. And so in my brain, I immediately associated this to bad outcomes. And I was like, "No, this is not what I wanted. Like, this is not how I imagined my labor would go." And of course, our labors never go how we imagine, right? But this was just not a possibility that I considered. And so I was like, "Okay, all right, I need to calm down." So Carrie's just sitting so calmly in my recliner in the corner of my room, just like observing me. And I'm like, "All right, I'm gonna call my husband, tell him to come home for work." Because I just like intuitively, the whole pregnancy felt like this labor is gonna be fast. Like it's gonna be quick. My first was 8 hours. Granted, I took castor oil. But I was like, the body keeps score, right? This labor is gonna be quick. I called my husband to come home from work, and he was like, "Actually, this is perfect timing. I just wrapped up. Like, I have nothing else to do. Like, this could not have been a better time." And I was like, "Perfect, great," because his job is he works in the car industry, and it was the weekend, and that's their busiest time and approaching the end of the month. So we were kind of stressed about like when I went into labor, whether or not he was even going to be able to take off work. And so it really was just like divine timing that worked out. And it was a Friday night. So I was able to call my mom to come keep my toddler for the weekend. So all of this just kind of, even though it wasn't the timing that I really desired, it really was perfect. And so I went and packed a little bag for my daughter. Because at this point, I'm still not having contractions. My water's just broken, and I'm like, "All right, what do we do now?" Like, I'm in like prep mode. And so I packed a little bag for her, and I just like looked at her and I was like, I need a minute with you. And so I was like, let's read a book. And I sat down with her and we just read a book together. And I just like hugged her and kissed her and told her how much I loved her and that she would always be my baby and how much I was going to miss her and all this stuff. And I just started weeping. Like, uncontrollable crying. I could not stop crying just because I just felt this immense like grief over like her not being my only baby anymore. And I think it's really important for listeners to know that like that's such a natural feeling and that I really encourage you to lean into that because
Yes.
right after that I had a huge gush of fluid and my contractions started.
Wow.
It's like my body just needed me to let go of
Mhm.
all of these preconceived notions of basically control, like things I was trying to control. I did that. My mom came over. She picked her up. My husband got home. So it was about like 8 o'clock when all of that happened. Like he was home, she was gone, the house was quiet. So around like 8 o'clock, I went downstairs and he had picked up like Chick-fil-A. I was like, this isn't the best thing for me to eat right now, but you know what? I just need some protein because this might be a long night. So I'm like, I eat one chicken nugget and I'm like, ew, I don't want this. I mean, I usually love Chick-fil-A, so it's not the Chick-fil-A. It was just like my body was like, no, we're not doing this right now, especially after being sick. So I'm just kind of like rocking back and forth in the kitchen, talking to him, like trying to be distracted. And then I realized oh, I'm having contractions like regularly now. And I looked at the clock and it was like 8:01, and then it was like 8:04, and it was like 8:07. I was like, okay, these are kind of close together. And they weren't like painful or anything like that, but I was starting to notice the beginning and the end, and I was like, well, I guess I'm actually having a baby tonight. All right, we should get everything ready. Like my midwife's still here. She's like, let's just wait till things calm down and we can see if you want me to stay or not. I was like, okay. I'm really glad she was here when my water broke because she really talked me down. Like I was really, really panicking. So I came back upstairs and I just like stood with her for a second and cried. And I was like, I am so scared right now. Like I don't know what's going to happen to me and I've never been scared of labor. I was not even scared of my first labor, and I've been so excited for this day. Why do I feel like this? Why do I feel so scared? And she was like, everything is going to be fine. Your baby's going to come. And I was like, okay, you think so? Like, are you sure it's going to happen? Like, all right. And so I just was like, okay, I don't think I want you to go very far because I don't know how fast this is going to go. So she just like ran to go get some dinner and come back. And I texted my doula, who was also my birth photographer, and I was like, "Hey, it's probably 8:30. I was like, I am definitely in labor, but like early labor, but I don't know how long it's gonna go or like how fast it's gonna go. So maybe you should just come over." She lives literally half a mile down the road. Like I could almost walk to her house. So I was like, "Your kids are in bed, and like you can go back home if things don't pick up. But like I would think I would just feel better if you were here." And my midwife reminded me, she was like, sometimes labor progresses actually when people are here because you feel safe and like you're not waiting on anything, which was kind of a problem, like a theme in my last labor, is my body was just waiting and waiting and waiting until people got there to actually like, as soon as my midwife got there, I was like, feel like I'm gonna push. And so this time I was like, it's kind of weird, but I think I'll have people here early. Like it just kind of felt like right, even though it didn't make sense to me. Again, I was just following my intuition. I was like, come on over. And so I'm just sort of like the contractions are starting to get more intense, and I'm just in my room, just kind of like leaning over my bed, swaying over my dresser. And I'm like, whoa, this is kind of getting hard. Like, I forgot that labor is like not fun. I was just expecting this like beautiful, easy experience. And like, your body really does make you forget what it's really like. And that's how we reproduce, you know? So there came a moment though where I was like, okay, I'm still very cognizant of what's happening right now. And I can hear a camera shuttering and I can feel you guys looking at me. And this is strange. Like, even though you guys feel like my family and like I want you to be here, honestly, I was like, I really need to like poop and I don't want you around. So like, can I go to the I just need some like privacy. And so I asked my husband to stay with me and I asked them to go just be downstairs in the kitchen, eat dinner, hang out until he called them to come back up. And so I was like, you know what? I was like, I've had a long day. I stink. I think I just need to like take a shower and just like get my mind right, like clean my body, like just feel like prepared for the night ahead. So I go to the bathroom and I get in the shower and like this was probably around 9 o'clock. I got in the shower and I don't think I realized it, but I was like moving very quickly into active labor. So I'm like, we had this little stool in my shower, and I'm like bent over the stool with the water on my back, and I'm like, oh, this feels great. And I'm just like swaying and vocalizing through contractions. And then at some point, I think I asked my husband to tell the birth photographer to come back up or something. And I just hear behind me, I hear my midwife's voice, and she says, Taylor, is there anything I can do for you? And I realized, oh, I'm gonna have a baby soon. I like heard myself because my response to her was, I want this baby out. And she was like, okay, all right. And I had been so calm and collected until this point, and I could hear like the anger in my voice, like the frustration of like, this sucks right now. And so I was like hearing myself as like a third person and being like, oh, she's about to have a baby. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'm farther than I thought. So I like tried to reach my hand up to like feel my own cervix. I could never get up there because of my belly. But I was like, I don't feel anything. I don't feel a head. I don't, like I don't feel there's a baby in there. So maybe I'm wrong. Like maybe I'm actually not that far. I don't know. So I just get to the point then now where I'm like yelling through contractions, like roaring. And I'm like, okay, my husband, so sweet, is like, do you want to get out of the shower? Because I had originally said I wanted to birth on land because I water birthed my first and I wanted to do it on, I just envisioned myself being like on my floor on the nugget, like in front of my bed. And that did not happen. Once I got in the water, I was like, I can literally not imagine getting on dry land right now. Like, no, thank you.
Same.
Um, so I
I
said,
want that. Like it's like
yeah.
I would love to try that, but I don't think
My
I
body
can.
was like, nope, you stay in this hot water. So I was like, well, maybe we could fill up the bathtub. Maybe I'll get some relief, like just sitting in the bathtub. So if someone ever tells you to fill up a bathtub in labor, they're probably not just about to get some relief. They're probably about to have a baby, just FYI. So I get out and I get in the tub and I get on all fours and realize my back does not go in the water because it's just a normal bathtub. And I was like, oh, I just screwed myself because I cannot get out of this tub now. And so I like had a couple of contractions that just like I feel were just like ripping through my body. And I was like, this is insane. Like I had no idea how much time had passed. I wasn't in labor land, which was interesting, but like I was still very aware of everything happening. I just was not interested in asking any questions at that point. I just was trying to get through each contraction. I was like, okay, I can't get my back in the water. And my sweet husband, I didn't even have to ask him, like found a pitcher and started pouring water over my back. And I was like, wow, what a great, like intuitive move from you because that does not come naturally to most people. And so I was very, very proud of him for that. And so he starts pouring water over my back and I start getting angry and I'm like, more. Faster, do it more. Like I was just like yelling and I was like, this is crazy. What is happening to me right now? Not realizing how fast it was going. I was like, this is crazy, but I feel like I have to push. Like, what? I looked at my midwife and I was like, why is there no blood? There's no blood in this tub. And immediately I was like, oh my God, I've not no bloody show. What if I'm like a 4 and this is just gonna be like the rest of the night? I was like, I can't do that. I looked at her, I said, I hate this. I cannot do this. I'm gonna break in half. I'm done. And she said, Taylor, you're about to have a baby. I was like, oh, okay. Why is there no blood? And she was like, there doesn't have to be. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, she just reminded me of all the things that I knew. And I think, in a way, my first was a little easier because I was naive. And now, having all of this experience in the birth world, I am just like, oh, no bloody show? That means it's not time. This is happening, then that means we're at this point in labor. And it's like, just time and time again, I am surprised by birth and the process and how there is no rules. Like
Right.
there is no rhythm, there is no specific protocol of how birth is going to go. So I was like, all right, I feel kind of pushy, and so I like tried pushing on one contraction. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Like something feels wrong. I'm like not getting any momentum. I don't like I've done this before and it wasn't this hard. So I realized my legs, like I couldn't I couldn't get my knees far apart because I was in this little narrow tub. And so I was like, okay, maybe I'll need to put a leg up. So I put a leg up and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, this is what I needed to do. Like, I just need some space in my pelvis, right? And then I was like, actually, I think I need the other leg up. And so I put the other leg up and immediately the fetal ejection reflex kicked in.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, okay, this baby's being born. I said, all right, she just dropped down and is turning and I can feel her. Like, she's coming now. And so this was like 10:15. She starts descending and I just intuitively just start like panting because I'm like, I can feel the ring of fire. I can feel her stretching. Like I can feel everything, which was also different from my first. I was so in labor land that I had no idea what was happening. I didn't know she was born. My midwife was like, she's out. You can pick her up. I was like, what? And so this one, I was like telling them what was happening. And I was like, I had told them, ahead of time, like, I don't want anybody near me except for my husband. I'm going to catch this baby. I'm going to call the shots. Like, I didn't even want any monitoring. I was like, I don't want anything. And at some point I said, my back. And my midwife was like, would you like some counter pressure? And I was like, yes. And after the birth, she's so sweet. She was like, I know you said you didn't want to be touched and I gave you some counter pressure. Is that okay? I said, yes, I asked you for it. Like I did want it, but thank you for like remembering that and being so aware of my wishes and respecting my autonomy. Like that means so much to me. And so the fetal ejection reflex kicks in and I'm just like panting and she's coming out and I'm like, all right, she's crowning. I'm like, all right, her head's out. Can you confirm her head is all the way out? Because in the last birth, I remember my midwife being like, all right, we got to get her chin out. Like her head didn't come all the way out. And I was like, oh, okay. And then so I was like, well, her head's out. The hard part's over. Thinking, I'll just have one more push and her body will come out. And that did not happen. I was like, oh, well, this is harder than I expected. So my body just starts bearing down again, like uncontrollably, and her body's not coming. And I freaked out for just half a second. And I looked back at my midwife and I was like, why is she not coming out? Because I was like, oh my God, I do not want to have to handle a shoulder dystocia right now. Like, this is not in my plans. Like, thinking this whole time she's gonna be like 7 pounds. Like, thinking she's this tiny baby. Like, what's the big deal? Carrie was just like, she's fine. She already turned. And I was like, okay, that's all I needed to know. She's doing her job. My body's just trying to slow it down because this was really, really fast. And so one more contraction, my body started pushing again. She came out. I picked her up, pulled her up to my chest, and just like intuitively started stimulating her and flipped her over to do some like postural drainage and just started talking to her. And she let out a big cry. And I was like, okay, we're all good. Like everything's done. Little did I know her chest was a full inch bigger than her head.
Oh, baby.
And I was like, yeah, her chest was like almost 15 inches. And I'm
Oh
like,
my word.
how did I pulled her up and the student was like, Taylor, that's a big baby. And I said, really? And I looked down at her and I was like, whoa, she's massive. She's got to be 10 and a half pounds, which is crazy because my first was not. And I was thinking like, I had my blood sugar under control. Like she's going to be totally normal size. Like I just have all this fluid and I guess the fluid masked the baby because she was massive in there. She was perfectly fine. There was no issues. My active labor was like an hour, hour and a half long. So it just felt really jarring. Like even though I really did pray for a fast labor. My whole pregnancy, I prayed for a fast, uncomplicated labor. And I'm glad that I had it because I don't think I, after that illness, could have handled a marathon labor. It would have just been either miserable or it would have transferred, and either one is not great. So I handled labor just fine because it was pretty quick. But afterwards, because I was so aware of everything, it made it very hard to settle my body. So I had just like high adrenaline. Like I didn't really have that big oxytocin high because I felt like it was clouded by the adrenaline. I was shaking and I couldn't stand up straight because my ribs hurt so bad from like all of the pressure that had been like built up, and I like couldn't take a deep breath because my lungs couldn't expand. It was just like very uncomfortable immediate postpartum. I was expecting all this relief and I didn't, it's not there. Like what's going
Mm.
on? And so my midwife and the student like immediately started like my midwife like hugged me and rubbed like St. John's wort oil on my chest and did like a myofascial like a myofascial like rib release and diaphragm release like right there in my bathroom, just like helping me be comfortable and just assuring me like everything's fine, you're doing great, like let's just get you to the bed. And I I was like, get this placenta out of me. I had forgotten. I told her, I was like, nobody touch the cord, nobody touch the placenta. I'll do my own cord traction. I'm gonna use, I'm just gonna get the placenta out myself. Nobody touch me. And then I was like, Carrie, get it out. Get it out. I was like, the cramping, I cannot handle all of this happening at one time. So thankfully, she didn't have to do anything. She was just like, just try to lay in the bed, cough, and see if you can push it. And I pushed it out immediately. So it was no big deal. But I was just like, your mind can change so quickly in labor. And that's okay. And it doesn't have to be 100% your original plan. The important part for me was that I still got to make the decisions. She wasn't saying, we got to get this out, or maybe it would be better if I just got it out. It was like she waited for my call because there was nothing immediately wrong. I wasn't bleeding. I wasn't, nothing crazy going on. It was just like, Taylor, this is your experience. What do you want? And I was like, okay, I changed my mind. Actually, I want this. I want this right now. It was just so helpful.
Mhm.
And so, such a relief to feel like truly everything was my decision in this birth.
Yes. I think that a really great point that you just made is kind of this idea of autonomy does not have to equal rigidity. Like
Yeah.
you get to change your mind when you want to change your mind. That
Yeah.
doesn't, and being able to accept that is another incredible step of responsibility of like,
Mhm.
all right, well, I decided in this moment I actually do want that cervical check, or I do want
Yeah.
cord traction, or I do want this or that. And being able to integrate that into your experience and say, yeah, okay, this is what I want. It may not have been what I wanted prior to this moment, but in this moment, I know that this is what I want. And that is totally fine and such a great thing to be able to integrate and recognize that that is exactly what autonomy is.
Yeah, totally. I want to remind people because I used to be I think this is common for people who are early in birth work or really just fired up about birth and home birth and autonomous birth is like, you absolutely can birth freely without free birthing. In the beginning of my labor, I remember saying to my husband, who would want to do this alone? Like, I get it, some people do, but like totally. I mean, I could if nobody made it, I could have done it with my husband. It would be just fine. But I was like, I hate that people feel like their only option when their only option is to do it alone because they don't have someone who's supportive to be there to, just to like hold their hand and tell them they're doing a good job. Like I don't feel like I could free birth, not because I'm not capable, but because I just want somebody to be like, you're doing so great. Like, that's not my husband, because I know he thinks that, but I want a third party to be like, yeah, no, you're doing great. Like, and so we sort of get this mindset that like all doctors are bad, or, this midwife wants me to do this, and this is the protocol and whatever. And I just want to remind everybody, like, you can still have the birth you want. You might have to fight a little bit harder prenatally to really make sure your wishes are clear. But it's okay to like repeat 18 times, like, this is what I want, or this is what I don't want. And you can absolutely still get the birth you want, even if you have a whole birth team. Like, I had 4 people there that I chose to be there. And I said, don't any of you talk to me or touch me. I just want you here. Like, especially for the postpartum. That's really why I wanted them there, was for the postpartum care. And it just was so amazing to me that I could have a room full of people and no one said a word. And no one suggested anything to me. No one said, you should try this. It was just like a reverence for birth. Like, they were just there. And if I wanted them, I could ask for help, but I didn't have to. And I didn't feel like anything was expected of me. And so a lot of that came from the work I did prenatally to really research my options and to choose my team and to just make it somewhat uncomfortably clear what I wanted. I literally wrote it in a note on my phone and shared it and was like, I know this sounds kind of like maybe harsh or kind of blunt, but like if I don't say it, it won't get said. And so just another example of taking responsibility really looks like.
Hmm. Yes. I hear several things that you've kind of mentioned in this that I think are really critical. One of them is I mean, I think this is the right word for this, but the dogma that comes with birth at home in particular, but especially we kind of push ourselves into these camps of,
Hmm.
like only free birth, that's the only way to go, or
Yeah.
only a certified professional midwife, that's the only way. And all of these ideas and how it's like, oh my goodness, if we could just loosen up a little bit. Like, it's
Yeah.
not cut and dry. It is so not cut and dry. And yes, to be able to appreciate the midwife, like the role of a midwife, this there is a reason that there are wise women that
Yeah.
have throughout, all of humankind come and attended births and been there. And so much of it, yes, is this emotional guarding. It's also physical guarding. Like, your
Yeah.
midwife was there, and if something went an unexpected way, you had somebody there that knew what to do. And
Hmm.
yes, we know that in low risk mothers, that is so uncommon. But
Right.
wow, like, how special to have that person there guarding you emotionally and guarding you physically if need be. I think that
Yeah.
is an incredible aspect. And oh my goodness, yes to the postpartum. Oh my goodness,
Yes.
yes to the postpartum.
Just to allow me to not have to think about it. Like
Yes.
to not be in my thinking brain when something is like all I had to do was look at her and get some reassurance and then I could just chill. I didn't have to like assess everything myself. Could I have? Yeah, sure. I have the training,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I should, that I should have to or that I wanted
That
to.
you want
So,
to. Yes, and here we come all the way back to intuition again. Like, all the way back. And I know that in different areas of the country, in different little pockets, things are harder. You some moms may have to make really hard decisions
yeah.
because of the lack of care providers and the lack of quality care providers who are willing to trust mothers and to trust birth until there is clear reason to intervene. Like, it is hard to find those
It is really hard.
perfect, like, understanding, compassionate care providers. That's tough.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, just going back to that intuition, what is right for this birth and what is right for this birth may be completely different with your next birth.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
being able to just tune in, for me, it's prayer and listening to the Holy Spirit of like, okay, what is this experience? What am I gaining from this? What do I need? And just being willing to go with that, as opposed to, no, well, this is the strong hold that I believe, like, this is
Yeah.
my dogma, this is what I believe about birth, and I won't do anything else. There's so much more maturity in being able to assess each situation with our intuition.
Totally. And I want to make one more point, Caitlin, that at the end of my pregnancy, the last like week or two, my blood pressure started to creep up a little bit. And then I was a little bit nervous and I was like, hmm. So I was checking in at home and then I had my midwife check it with her manual cuff just to see like what it really was. And it wasn't concerning, but it was like borderline. It was high for me. And I was like, okay, I have gestational diabetes. My blood pressure is getting high. Like all of these signs in a normal realm of care would point to induction. And I was just like, I just don't feel like there's anything wrong. Like, I just don't feel like we need to do anything about it. I was really tempted to take castor oil again. And my doula was like, I will literally come knock it out of your hands. Do not do that. I was like, okay, thank you for the reminder because I said at the beginning of my pregnancy, I might be tempted to take castor oil again at the end, and please don't let me. Just because I knew how crazy it makes you feel. But yeah, so my blood pressure started creeping up, and my midwife was like, "If you would like it, I'll order you like a metabolic panel. So you can get your labs done, make sure everything looks normal. Between that and the swelling and whatever, you can check for protein, whatever." She's like, "You don't look like you don't have any other signs of preeclampsia." She's like, "I'm not immediately worried, but if it makes you feel better, you can go get these labs done, and I'll order you a biophysical profile. You can go get an ultrasound." So that was like 40 weeks. And I was like, okay. So I almost went and got that ultrasound. And I was like, you know what? I feel like everything's okay. So I'm not gonna do this because I'm not gonna freak myself out. I was like, if I get to 41 weeks, 42 weeks, and I'm still concerned, maybe I'll go check. But I was like, I have a feeling if I go to get this ultrasound, they're going to tell me something that's not actually accurate that's going to just make me anxious. So I didn't go. And then I had this 10 and a half pound baby,
Yep.
which would have really, really made me nervous going into a home birth and not knowing like, can my pelvis handle that? I don't know. I'm 5'1". I'm a very small person in stature. And I was like, I have no idea how much room is in there. And so I didn't want that preconceived notion going into labor. And after my baby was born, we realized I had a marginal cord insertion or battle door insertion. And if they had caught that on the ultrasound, I would have freaked out too. And what's crazy is like that normally, like the complications from that are usually like preterm labor, early, like low birth weight, like all of the opposite things of what I had. Yeah, I thought it was funny that I chose not to get that ultrasound. And then in hindsight, if I had, my labor probably would have gone a lot differently. There probably would have been a lot more fear, a lot more anxiety. I probably would have done something to interfere with it, probably would have made it a lot harder. And so, yeah, just one more time, I cannot say it enough to follow your intuition.
Yes, and especially like what a perfect example, Taylor, because at 23 weeks, that's what you needed.
Yeah.
And then at 40, that was the opposite choice, you know, and but it wasn't based on like, oh, all ultrasounds are good or all ultrasounds are
Right.
bad. It's no, guys, it's about each individual situation. Like,
Yep.
it is about learning to be in tune with our bodies. And I know for some of the listeners out there, you might be feeling like, but I can't. But that's not me. I don't understand. And I am here to tell you it is you. It is. I know there are so many outside things vying for our attention, making it difficult to connect, but there are ways. So I think that at the end of the episode, I'll kind of jump into that a little bit more in the episode roundup. But wow, Taylor, what a beautiful example. Like so many times throughout this birthing experience, throughout your pregnancy, just again and again, recognizing that deep connection to your intuition and how that served you and your baby so well. Incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So your birth story was so beautiful and so amazing, even in the midst of so much difficulty. Like, it was not like, oh, it was just like a bright, sunny, wonderful, easy event. Like, no,
No.
there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
But still, like, I think that recognizing that like a quote happy home birth comes in so many forms, and
Yeah.
gosh, what you gleaned from this, it seems to me, and I'd love to hear your perspective, but it seems to me that you did just like level up on the wisdom. Like, you just leveled up so much with intuition and all of these things, and that's got to feel pretty good.
Totally. Yeah, I walked away from this experience like feeling nothing but good feelings.
Mm,
And like no doubt there's nothing I would have changed about it except I mean maybe I would have made it a little easier, but I
right.
don't have the power to do that.
Yeah.
Whatever I feel in my body is what I feel in my body, and part of that I attribute to being so weak and depleted from being sick. But again, I couldn't have picked a better scenario for what did happen. The way that I was treated by my team, the way that I felt the responsibility that I was able to take willingly and just feel like I was respected, and that like there's no better feeling
Mm,
than knowing that your wishes were respected and that everything went the way that it was supposed to go.
mm. That's beautiful. Wow. Okay. So the other thing that I did want to bring up is you are building a really beautiful birth business. You mentioned that you are really involved in the birth world here in Greenville. And then I know that you have an amazing podcast of your own. So would you share with us about your business and your podcast?
Yeah, this is so crazy full circle because when I moved here, Caitlin, I somehow randomly found your podcast. This was before I ever had kids. It was like 2020. This podcast is what ultimately made me decide to have a home birth. I want to say thank you for starting this podcast in the first place because it has like really changed my life. So, yeah, I'll kind of say this is twofold. So, my business is both in person and online. And I started my in person doula business when my daughter was like 10 months, my first was like 10 months old. So, about 2 years ago, just as a local doula. And I have actually recently transitioned to an agency model here in the upstate. So um,
Amazing.
we serve home birth moms. It's very niche. Like we do a lot with nutrition counseling, like a lot with postpartum support. It's very like nurturing to mom. It's less about childbirth ed and there all of that is included, but it's more like what herbs can we bring you? Can we bind your belly? Can we like sit with you and talk? Like that kind of doula support, which is really amazing to offer through pregnancy and birth and postpartum, just like the whole package, which is what I was doing initially. But there's just so many women that I'm like, how can I extend my reach? And the answer is without getting burnt out, I can't. So let me bring some more people on my team that can do exactly what I'm doing. And we all have the same heart for serving. We're all believers and we're all like love women. So that has been sort of the change in my in-person business lately. But also, I did this year really start with my online business. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that, Taylor. That is incredible. Would you share what's your podcast called so people can find it?
Yeah, it's called Holistic Pregnancy. So you can find it on Apple or Spotify, and it's just what it sounds like. So we talk about anything from cycle tracking and preconception all the way to like postpartum mental health and like we've got some really fun stuff coming up. Like we're gonna do a top like an episode on like sex after having babies, and it's like stuff that people you don't really hear about all that often, and you definitely don't hear from a holistic perspective. And so yeah, it's really exciting. I'm excited for we've had 2 seasons already, and I'm really excited for the upcoming 2 seasons as well later this year. So
Amazing. Wow.
yay.
Taylor, you are doing incredible things as a mother. It's beautiful to see as a businesswoman, as a care provider for other women. It's holistic. It's beautiful. It's incredible. And I'm grateful to know you. I am so grateful that you were coming on the Happy Home Birth podcast. Thank you, Taylor, so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. It's been an honor.
I am pretty sure I pop back on after every interview with a phrase like, wow, wasn't that amazing? And that's because, I mean, wasn't it? I am just over and over in awe of mothers and their stories. So let's hop into our educational tidbit segment for this week's episode and finish up with our episode roundup. Let's take just a moment to highlight the label of gestational diabetes. Now, this is an example of a label that has large implications for mothers and the care that they receive without equally large indications that the label provides improvement in outcomes. In fact, there is a great deal of controversy globally in regards to determining who should be considered gestationally diabetic. Now, here is what we can say. High blood glucose levels in pregnancy can cause complications, including, and most commonly, number one, a bigger baby, with the extra weight often settling around the shoulders. Number two, it can be a tougher transition for baby once he's born as his blood glucose levels rebalance, sometimes causing hypoglycemia. And number three, high insulin can lead to slower production of surfactant, which is what readies the lungs to breathe. This comes into play with babies born on the earlier side, especially when labor is not spontaneous. So, ignoring the label of gestational diabetes altogether, with all of its faults and flaws, we can agree that having stable blood glucose levels is something we want to aim for our health and the health of our babies. Here's the good news. As we alluded to in this episode, you can very often impact your blood glucose levels with diet, with exercise, with stress reduction, hello, nervous system healing. And all three of those things are good for you and your baby, whether you have a specific diagnosis or not. So, why not focus on these aspects preemptively? Lily Nichols is a dietitian who has written 2 books that are both extremely useful for this topic: Real Food for Pregnancy and Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. She breaks down the science and gives simple, delicious recipes. Now, I interviewed Lily on the podcast several years ago, so I will be sure to link that episode in the show notes as well. Next, I've also linked 2 articles in the show notes going further down the rabbit trail that is gestational diabetes and being diagnosed with it. If you want to learn more from a balanced, non fear mongering perspective, I recommend starting there. Now, if you're curious about more of the ways that you can foster your health and the health of your baby naturally during pregnancy, we have several modules inside of Happy Home Birth Academy focusing on just that. I've got the link in the bio if you're ready to get started today. And now for our episode roundup. If there's one word that demands your attention in this episode, I hope it's intuition. Taylor's decisions were not informed by sheer logic or dogma. No, the seed of her decision making came from a deeper source, from what I believe to be Holy Spirit guided intuition. Intuition, that inner knowing that oftentimes goes against your expectations. Taylor isn't a huge fan of ultrasounds for herself, but she sensed that an ultrasound is what she needed. This ended up providing her with the information she used to support her body and baby through gestational diabetes. And again, we see this intuition work in the complete opposite direction at the end of pregnancy, where Taylor felt that she shouldn't have a scan. Looking back, she knows that this prevented her from unnecessary fear regarding her baby's weight. Now, I love how this example unfolded. We take the same topic, ultrasounds, and apply intuition to them in two different directions. That, my friends, is what it looks like to listen to your intuition. Next, I want to remind you of just how deeply our emotions are connected to labor and birth. Taylor needed to take her baby into her arms, hold her, and grieve the change that was coming. Yes, of course, adding a new baby is a massive blessing to a family. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a sense of pain at leaving behind all of the old ways. Honoring this feeling is exactly what led Taylor deeper into labor. Feel those feelings and don't be afraid of them. And finally, Taylor's love for birth work came from her own experiences. She realized that she had something to offer other mothers, other families, after having her first daughter. She decided to seek out a way to be both the mother that she desired to be and also build a thriving business at the same time. Sounds impossible, right? But Taylor is doing it very successfully, I might add. Her online business, her doula agency, it's incredible. Taylor sought education from someone who values family, business, and birth work. She found a coach who wouldn't tell her to push aside family for money, but who would encourage her to and teach her to make a way for both. Kylie is a genius at this, and she's hosting a live masterclass just for my listeners tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. The link to sign up is in the show notes, and I do not want you to miss this. I have seen so much growth from the listeners who have attended this masterclass in the past, and I want that for you if growing your business is a desire that the Lord has placed on your heart. I will be there taking notes because I gain something new every time Kylie speaks. Okay, my friends, that is all that I've got for you for today. I'll see you back here and tomorrow next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Are you looking to extend the home birth support, encouragement, and education? Join us in our Facebook group, Happy Home Birth Podcast Community, and check us out on Instagram at Happy Home Birth Podcast.